Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, thousands charged with cannabis-related crimes. We'll take a look at the impact decriminalization could have on Kentuckians. Plus, FEMA officials say they need billions to properly respond to natural disasters.
And we start fall this weekend, but we're not done with the warmer weather just yet. Your full forecast coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to southern and eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. States across the country have moved to decriminalize cannabis, but Kentucky remains just one of 18 where cannabis is still criminalized. As Samantha Valentino shows us, more than 300,000 people in Kentucky have been charged with a cannabis-related crime in the past 2 decades.
Every hour, roughly 2 people are charged with a cannabis-related crime in Kentucky. That's according to an analyst of AOC data done by the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. They also found that more than half of those people were convicted.
Cannabis-related charges affect every county in the state, and it varies based on county, but our rural areas are sometimes twice as likely to convict people of cannabis-related charges than our bigger cities, but there's no county in Kentucky that isn't dealing with this issue.
Over the course of 2 decades, more than 64,000 people in the Appalachian region were charged with cannabis offenses. Not far off from Jefferson County's more than 72,000 people charged in the same period, and more than 3 times Fayette County's roughly 18,000. Kaylee Raymer with the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy says even a misdemeanor possession conviction can have lasting harmful effects on a person's life.
They may be subject to fines and fees. Depending on their record and the type of charge, they may end up on probation and have to report to a probation officer or comply to other terms of probation. They may also face new factors when trying to look for a job with a cannabis charge or conviction on the record. It could affect their ability to get housing.
That's why Raymer says decriminalizing cannabis in Kentucky would have a positive impact on the entire state.
We could regulate and tax cannabis. That's new revenue for our state, so we can pay for the resources Kentuckians need. And the good thing about decriminalizing cannabis is most other states have already done it. So we have a lot of models that we can look at. We can see what mistakes were made.
In Frankfort, Samantha Valentino, WKYT.
Raymer says if cannabis is decriminalized in Kentucky, legalization legislation should include expungement processes for anyone with cannabis charges or convictions.
This fall preview continues across the mountains into your Tuesday evening. Here's a live look right now over in Hazard. That current temperature at 70 degrees. It does not get much better for the middle and end of September. Most of us right now in those 70s. And up on the radar, we are quiet, all thanks to high pressure. And as this weather system sits over the region for several days, we are tracking a stretch of some sunny weather into this evening. Also a stretch of some drier weather for much of the work week. Those temperatures right now in the 70s, 72 for Clintwood, down to 68 though for Wise, also Grundy, 74 in Jackson, 75 for Manchester, and 77 for Irvin, also over into London. The countdown is on, 3 days away from the kickoff of fall, but we are not done with the warmer weather just yet. We do see above average temperatures by Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Highs back in the middle to lower 80s. We should be in the upper 70s. So again, we are watching out for some milder weather to move back into the region. That full forecast coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
Cameron, thank you. Both President Biden and the Ukrainian president made their case on the world stage for continued support for Ukraine in its war against Russia. The speeches at the United Nations General Assembly come as the world is growing weary of the war, and some lawmakers here in the United States are questioning whether it makes sense to continue funding Ukraine's efforts. CBS's Michael George reports from the UN.
Russia alone bears responsibility for this war.
President Biden is vowing unconditional support for Ukraine.
The United States, together with our allies and partners around the world, will continue to stand with the brave people of Ukraine as they defend their sovereignty and territorial integrity and their freedom.
In his speech to the United Nations General Assembly, the president touched on a wide range of subjects, from climate change to the tense relationship between the U.S. and China.
We seek to responsibly manage the competition between our countries so it does not tip into conflict.
For the first time since Russia's invasion, Ukraine's president appeared in person in front of the gathering of world leaders, trying to rally support as nations grow weary of the conflict.
President of Ukraine.
Volodymyr Zelensky argued that unless Russia is stopped, its aggression won't end with Ukraine.
Look, for the first time in modern history, we have a real chance to end the aggression on the terms of the nation which was attacked.
Zelensky is set to visit the White House and Capitol Hill later this week as Congress weighs President Biden's request for an additional $24 billion in aid. Some in the Republican Party are questioning whether it makes sense to continue funding the Ukrainian effort. Michael George, CBS News, the United Nations.
President Biden is the only leader from the 5 nations with permanent seats on the powerful UN Security Council to speak before the assembly this year. The heads of China and Russia, as well as the leaders of U.S. allies France and Britain, all decided to skip the event. During his speech, President Biden expressed his support for expanding the membership of the Security Council. The Republican-controlled House Oversight Panel will hold its first hearing in its impeachment inquiry into President Biden on September 28th. A committee spokesperson says next week's hearing will focus on constitutional and legal questions. Subpoenas to members of the Biden family are also in the works. That includes subpoenas to the president's son Hunter and brother James Biden as early as this week. Well, Hunter Biden plans to plead not guilty to federal gun charges. The president's son made the announcement in a court filing just a short time ago. In a letter to Magistrate Judge Christopher Burke, attorney Abby Lowell said Biden will plead not guilty to the 3 felony gun charges relating to his possession of a revolver in 2018, whether the appearance is held over video or in person. Hunter was indicted last week on 3 charges relating to his purchase of a gun in 2018. Chester County, Pennsylvania officials vowed to do more security upgrades to Chester County Prison after multiple inmate escapes. This coming during a town hall yesterday. The meeting was the first one since convicted murderer Danilo Cavalcante escaped. Razor wire was added after Igor Bolt's escape in May, but Cavalcante was able to escape through that wire when he got away on August 31st. Officials also added a metal screen following Cavalcante's escape. The parents of FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried now face legal troubles of their own. The company's current leaders are suing them, accusing them of fraudulently misappropriating millions of dollars from FTX. The lawsuit also claims Joe Bankman and Barbara Fried ignored red flags about the business. In a statement, the couple's attorneys deny those claims. It claims the legal action is an attempt to undermine their son's trial days before it is set to start. Today, FEMA's top official fielded questions on Capitol Hill about the agency's readiness and ability to respond to natural disasters. CBS's Skylar Henry has more on that.
Weather disasters nationwide have dominated the media in this record-breaking year, from extreme heat, drought, and flooding to the deadliest wildfire to hit the U.S. in more than a century.
You're part of the federal government. This lack of transparency, it's not okay.
Those events took center stage on Capitol Hill Tuesday as FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell testified before a House subcommittee about how prepared the nation is to respond to catastrophes.
Our mission at FEMA has become more challenging. We can no longer really speak of a disaster season.
So far, September has been the most active month of the Atlantic hurricane season, with Hurricane Idalia and Tropical Storm Hilary leaving their marks coast to coast.
We've got a worsening climate crisis, and we've got insufficient funds.
With even more hurricane activity expected, FEMA's disaster fund is already running out.
We would have to further reduce those types of life-saving operations that we are working on based on the amount of funding that we have available.
FEMA officials are calling on Congress to pass a $12 billion supplemental funding bill to cover costs to help with natural disasters into next year. House Republicans have been hesitant to approve the funding because of its ties to a larger spending package involving unrelated aid to Ukraine.
Taxpayer resources through FEMA should not be diverted for other purposes unrelated to its mission.
Furthermore, Congress has yet to pass the bill to fund the government before a new fiscal year starts at the end of the month. Failure to do so could shut down the federal government. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
September is also National Preparedness Month, which is designed to raise awareness about the importance of preparing for disasters and emergencies that could happen in the country. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, saving for retirement is, of course, important, as is the type of account you use to build wealth, the differences between Roth and traditional 401k accounts.
Plus, we are dry for now, but the details on our next rain chance coming up after this break.